SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Welcome back. Morning, Rhino.
Howdy.
Well, it's been a whipsaw. It's the best way I could describe the last 48 hours or so. Man, oh man, we got tariffs, then we don't got tariffs, and then we maybe got tariffs. It's all over the place. But things are starting to normalize a bit, at least as far as the markets are concerned. They got spooked in the morning yesterday and sold off. But then they recovered somewhat, minor losses at the end of the day. Today, the Dow up 63 points. The NASDAQ's doing quite well. It's recovered nicely. It's up 239. And you know what's driving it there, Rhino? Palantir. These are the guys that actually leverage all that sophisticated AI chip and infrastructure technology. So all these data centers, all these chips, NVIDIA and so forth, that are installed in these hardened facilities, as we refer to data centers, purpose-built to house IT infrastructure. Well, they don't do any good if you don't have some software to run on top of them. And Palantir, these are the guys that take those large language models, essentially these giant repositories of information and data, and they put an interface on top of it and integrate between the end user, application software, and back end, that mountain of information, so that it's usable, essentially. I like this stuff. It's a
big mover. It just still feels like the brand Palantir, the company, still isn't as well known as its founder, Peter Thiel.
That's absolutely true. Who has founded a whole bunch of
he was
IT startups.
Was it PayPal?
PayPal, yeah.
Big payday, his first big payday.
Exactly. And there's some others he's been involved with. Did he not toy with running for president, perhaps? Or
I wouldn't have put it past him.
Yeah, I think he had some history there. But he's one of these guys in the valley there in California that has directed lots of money, lots of investments into these technology startups and done quite well. Palantir Technologies, one of them. I'm looking at the stock. This is rather unheard of. It is up 25% today, up $21, 25%, trading at $200. I'm hearing some analysts are calling for it to hit $300 within 52 weeks. So that would be a pretty good deal if you could pull that off. Nonetheless, the markets, again, they got a little concerned. I thought they overreacted, honestly, yesterday morning at the prospect of tariffs, because I just wasn't convinced ultimately between announcement and the deadline something wasn't going to break. and we would avert such tariffs. Well, it turns out that's what happened. You guys know by now that Mexico, they were the first that conceded, and they said, yep, we're going to boost security at the border. And that happened yesterday morning, of course, and then Mr. Trump called off the tariffs on Mexico. And
paused
then,
them.
I'm sorry? Paused them. It called them off from going into effect as they were scheduled to go. And then Canada, they came to the table with some concessions and agreements, commitments as well. What do we got? 30-day pause, I think? He said we're going to look at this
Canada
again.
and Mexico, 30-day pause. Both are contributing monetarily to the defense of the border. I believe one of Canada's stipulations is they have to acknowledge the cartels are terrorists.
That's right.
And they have to join the U.S. in a joint strike force against traffickers.
Yes. Now, I'm going to say something that may not be popular. I'm all for strengthening the border. Heck, we've made that clear a million times. That's got to be done. And I do totally believe, as is being induced by these threat of tariffs, that Mexico and Canada need to play a role in that. They benefit mightily from this country. Dadgummit, shut your border down.
And a lot of people, they understand the southern border because of the sheer volume of those that have crossed the southern border. But the length of the northern border and its general lack of attention is why it's believed more than 50 of the illegal immigrants that are on terror watch lists that made it into the U.S. came into the U.S. over the Canadian border.
Yeah. Here's my concern. I'm all for this. If people want to put that junk in their bodies, somebody's going to figure out a way to supply it to them. Now, I totally agree that when you've got organized, syndicated, for-profit, honestly brutal cartels in the mix, it makes that problem a whole lot more difficult to deal with. No doubt. I would like to see us, and this is over my head, I don't know what the solutions are, address the root cause, which is people want to put that stuff in their body. And that's a big problem. I can't help but remember the launch of the so-called war on drugs. Started in the 60s. I was in grade school. And I remember your Weekly Reader would have all kind of stuff in it about it, and they'd make us watch all these little film clips, film strips in those days, kind of the precursor to a PowerPoint presentation or little 8mm, 5-minute videos. And it was all intended to illustrate the dangers of drugs and hopefully to discourage you from getting involved in that.
My generation had DARE.
That's right. And you remember Nancy Reagan took that as her personal mission when Ronald Reagan was our president. I'm just saying that we still have a huge drug problem in this country. There's no doubt about it. And in this case, it's deadly. That's the problem with fentanyl. It's more than just drugs for a high. It kills you in extremely small quantities, and often when you're not even expecting to ingest. You don't even think you're taking drugs, right? That happens all the time. I'm just worried that we have too many people in this country that are addicted to these poisons, and they seek it out. And it's hard enough fighting the supply domestically, much less having to deal with corrupt cartels that I feel often are in the pockets, or maybe vice versa, with the regimes, the controlling government officials in those countries. Maybe not. I mean, I haven't seen any empirical evidence of that.
I think if you dug deep enough, you'd find more ties to China and the cartels.
I agree. And I know that's exactly what President Trump is aware of and why he's going after it. But that's consistent with his foreign policy across the board. Look at what he's doing in Greenland and the Panama Canal. The concerns are Chinese involvement. And he recognizes way more than the prior administration that China is our most ardent foe in all arenas, not just in terms of military assets and firepower, but in all kinds of other endeavors as well. And that's a problem.
The only thing they fall short of Russia on is the sheer number of nukes.
True. I mean, but where are we now? Between the United States and Russia, we could blow up the world like many times over, right? In terms of
theoretically,
the nuclear. If we were to
Russia's
unleash,
got a little over 8,000 nuclear warheads.
Something like that.
1,000 are operational, and the U.S. has got north of 7,000, and like 1,800 are operational.
Right. So I just also want to see us at the same time perhaps put some emphasis and focus and resources behind fighting this drug problem we have in this country. And maybe tariffs are a component of that. I get it. And to cause problems for the cartels. We got to do more, is all I'm saying. We're coming right back. It's Mike McCormick, president of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation. We'll get his take on the tariff action. Stay with us. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
They're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. It's our pleasure to welcome now Mike McCormick, president of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation. Mike, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Gerard. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So we have been talking a lot, as you know, about the tariffs that President Trump loves to leverage as a way to just get action from foreign nations. Trade is a big component of our economy. It's a big component of their economy as well. But something I talked about yesterday, and I want you to just confirm it with us because I know you're quite aware of all these facts and figures. First, Mississippi's economy, roughly a third of it, right, is agricultural based.
Largest part of our economy in our state.
Biggest industry in the state, yeah. Has been forever, essentially.
And will be forever, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the good Lord blessed us with incredibly fertile soil and all the other makings of the environment that makes Mississippi perfect for producing on the farms. All right, so
very blessed.
Yes. So a great deal of what is produced in Mississippi is exported outside of the country. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have to have export markets. We can't consume all the agricultural products that we grow here in the United States. And a lot of what the farmers get at the marketplace, because we're price takers, we don't get to decide how much this cost us, then add 30% profit on top of that. We're at the mercy of the market. We grow it for what it cost us, and we sell it from what the market will pay us for it. And a lot of that demand is driven by trade.
So with respect to tariffs, there's a problem for our farmers, and I'm phrasing this as a question. When Canada, Mexico, China, other importers of Mississippi farm products impose so-called retaliatory tariffs, it makes our products more expensive as they enter those countries.
Absolutely. Farmers are going to be the tip of the spear on this. They're the ones that's going to feel the pain the first and probably have to deal with it the longest when we get in trade disputes. Canada, Mexico, and China are our three biggest trade partners. Each one of them contribute 25, 26 to a little over $30 billion worth of trade a year for our American farmers. And those are the three countries, unfortunately, that we're talking about having this trade dispute with. Luckily, I think think over the weekend the president did put the pressure on the right place, and Canada and Mexico have come to some concessions that he agreed to withhold those tariffs for another 30 days as they work through the process. So I didn't see the markets get really volatile yesterday, and been watching it this morning. Haven't seen it. As you know, there's a lot of trade that's done over the computer. It's AI generated or whatever, and they're looking for headlines to see what's going on versus what's being sold, what's the negative, what's the positive in this. And right now what we're seeing is everything's pretty static as we're looking at the commodity market. So I think he got his point across to Mexico and Canada. Now China will be a whole different story.
So, Mike, what about our farmers who perhaps import products from other countries that are necessary in farming operations?
Well, that's a good point because Canada has about 80% of the potash that we import here into the United States. Of the three major parts of fertilizer that are important to farmers, potash is maybe the most important part of that. So when you're talking about a country having that much control over one specific market, it could have a huge impact on the expenses that our farmers could take into this year. And this would be the worst year that you could have a problem with increasing expenses. Our farm economy is probably the worst I've seen it in my lifetime, except maybe the 1980s when we saw all the bankruptcies. Steady talking to banks. Heard some horror stories yesterday. Right now is the time that the farmers are going into their local lenders to see what amount of money they're going to be able to secure to grow crops with this year, and it's just not a positive sign. They've had 2 years of really bad economic returns for their farms, and unfortunately this year, looking at the commodity market and the futures, just doesn't look like paint a rosy picture for what they're going to be able to do this year. So,
well, as you know, we had the lieutenant governor on a couple of weeks ago, and he was expressing serious concerns about the plight of Mississippi's farmers, and I'm not sure the average person, Mike, knows that the way the model works. They borrow money short term so they can buy everything they need and plant. They don't have anything coming in during the growing season, right? Then they harvest that, they sell it, they pay the loan back, and hopefully got some profit left over.
Yeah, hopefully pay that loan back. And I want to give credit to the lieutenant governor. I've talked to him numerous times, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, on this issue of non-profitability for the farmers in our state, row crop farmers specifically. And he's genuinely concerned. He's asking me, what can I do? What can we do as a state to help? We got to do something to help them. So I know he's searching for answers, but the biggest part of this is going to be a federal issue, and so we got a little support that's going to go a long way to help the banks for last year's crops that didn't pay out through what was done in the continuing resolutions in December. But we'll have to go back. We don't have a functioning farm bill right now. It's badly outdated and it needs to be updated. We've got to go back to Congress and say this is the year that you've got to act. I know we got a divided Congress still, and we've got to figure out a way for them to get something across the finish line. And then we've got to have a ag secretary confirmed. I think she did really well through the subcommittee, and will be out for a vote hopefully this week, maybe if not next. And she has promised that she's going to be our champion. And as these issues pop up, these tariffs and other things, she's going to be our voice to the White House. And I hear she's got a great relationship with the president, and we're going to need her.
Brooke Rollins, I believe, right?
Brooke Rollins,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, seems very qualified for the position. So, to clarify on the tariffs, on like potash that you mentioned, which is a huge component of the farming operation that is imported from Canada. That's you said 80%, which is incredible. The tariff is levied at the border, and it's charged to the importer, the American importer, that brings that in, and then I guess sells that ultimately to the farmers.
The farmer will be the one that'll pay
it. Yeah. And then they try to pass that on to the extent they can. But commodities, the demand and supply of commodities is probably the ultimate example of a more pure free market. Farmers don't control the price of those goods.
No, and if we could keep the governments playing fair around the world, your U.S. farmer can compete with anybody, and we do it very well. But the markets that are out there are already distorted. I give the president credit. He knows that it's not a level playing field for us, and he's trying to help. I just think we're going to feel some pain through the process, and in a year where I don't know that we can afford to feel that pain, and so we're going to have to watch as it goes forward. China will be interesting to see. I think they had a list of things out today that they're going to impose tariffs on. Not a lot of it's directly tied to agricultural, but a lot of it will be through inputs in the chemicals that we buy from over there, some tractor parts that we get from over there. It'll hit us in different ways, but we hope the president stood by us the last time through these negotiations, and we understand that he wants to do that again. But farmers don't want subsidies from government. They want free markets and to be able to make the money that they should make through their hard works on their farms.
Yeah, and that's another good point is that even though the farm equipment that farmers purchase to use in their operations may be from American-made companies, it likely includes components that are manufactured abroad and then come into this country and they're taxed at a tariff.
I was told yesterday that a lot of the big tractor and big combine engines and other big parts may cross the Canadian border multiple times, 2 or 3 times during the manufacture process, and each time it crosses, it will be subject to a tariff. So we could have multiple times that the farmers would get hit with that.
Well, I think the president's goal on a long-term basis is perhaps to relocate that manufacturing, even of those components, in this country. Yep. But that doesn't help us in the short term while that's ramping up.
Short-term pain, and we hope that it doesn't last long, and hopefully they can come to some agreements to fix the problems that they're trying to fix, and that the farmers won't have to be the point of the spear like we were the last time. We certainly understand the president ran on these policies, and he got elected on them, and he's got a mandate to do them, but we need a voice up there in Washington that can make sure they understand how this is going to impact the farmer down on the farm.
Mike, appreciate your insight as always. Thanks for coming in.
Yes, sir.
Mike McCormick. Mike McCormick, President, Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation, has been our guest. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We really appreciate Mike McCormick for joining us in the Element Wealth studio. He, of course, the president of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation, discussing how tariffs affect farmers. I guess something I hadn't thought about, Rhino, is sometimes in just producing a finished product, you may have goods that cross the line, the borders, back and forth a few times. So for example, he was telling me about how some mills here in Mississippi may produce raw material wood, ship it to China for final manufacturing of furniture. And so there's a tariff that China imposes on the import of that raw material, of that input to the production and manufacturing process of a finished piece of furniture, and then it's shipped back into this country. And, of course, a U.S. tariff is imposed on the finished product. And so all of that, of course, is baked into the price at the furniture store. Those back-and-forth sort of tariffs. It is a problem for our farmers, probably more so than any other industry in the state. Well, it's the largest, for one, but we produce a whole lot more than we eat here. Or use in other manufacturing further manufacturing processes that use farm commodities. So that's certainly an issue. But for right now, it's been averted. Now, we did have a question from Mike from Madison. Did the tariffs against China go into effect? They did. An additional 10% layered on top of the existing tariff. Now, you remember, these tariffs were imposed during Mr. Trump's first term, and they continued throughout the Biden administration. So what's very hypocritical, I know you're surprised that we have Democrat hypocrisy, but when they're railing against the president's tariff strategy, they don't seem to tell you that, well, the tariffs that were imposed by President Trump 45 continued throughout the Biden administration, talking about the China tariffs, China. And, in fact, more tariff revenue was collected during the Biden administration as a result of Chinese imports than during the Trump administration. Now, some of that is attributed to the fact that those were in place for the entire 4 years. Under the Biden administration, they were implemented at some point during the Trump administration, so it was less than the entire 4 years. And the other thing, of course, was the COVID in 2020 shut down much of the importing, and thus there were not as many products crossing into our country across the border there from China on which to levy the tariff. Nonetheless, they're still in place, and they continued. So, yes, he did. He put a 10% tariff, and again, those are paid by American companies that import Chinese goods. They're not paid by the Chinese Communist Party directly. Now, you could argue that the importers in this country go to their suppliers in China and say, look, you got to help us out here because if we're having to absorb 100% of this in accordance with this order, and we're going to have to pass it on to the consumer, and thus we're going to struggle selling those products. You're going to have to give in some too. I mean, that's part of the way negotiations occur. Or the American importer may find it viable to absorb those tariffs. More than likely, they get passed on to consumers. But to what extent? Because you get to a price point where the consumer says, I'm not buying that. And that's not good for the economy either. So I'm all for tariff diplomacy. I'm not a big fan of tariffs themselves. But I do think we need a level playing field. And I absolutely applaud the president, certainly in his first term, for pointing out the imbalance, not the imbalance in trade, but the imbalance in the duties that are levied by other countries on American products. And that was a big objective in his tariff strategy, was to get them to back down. One I remember that comes to mind, I think I have this right, wasn't it French wine? There was some disparity there, Rhino, that he pointed out, and France ended up conceding, as I recall. I think they were charging big tariffs on American-produced wine imported into France. We weren't on theirs. And he said, that's crazy. You're ripping us off. That's the terminology he likes to use. I agree. And I think that was a well-designed strategy, and it worked. Just as the threat of tariffs to Mexico and China at least got them to come to the negotiating table and make some offers that were consistent with what he was seeking. And so we got a 30-day pause. We'll see if they honor their commitments. I don't have a lot of confidence, honestly, in that, but I think it's the right thing to do. Okay, you've agreed to implement these various measures. You talked about it, troops at the border, taking a more serious interest in the fentanyl traffic crossing, both from Canada and Mexico, right? And
correct. And
I do think that Mr. Trump's absolutely right in that the root source of this is China. Is it not, for the fentanyl, or at least the ingredients used in
they
making?
manufacture the precursors, and sometimes they manufacture it entirely and ship it.
And let's be honest, they're okay if they kill Americans with drugs. They don't care. They celebrate it, as a matter of fact. So just recognizing.
Well, in general, they don't have much value on human life.
Totally true. If they did, they wouldn't.
That's why they have, on their version of TikTok, various ways you can test whether or not the cooking oil you bought at your local store is actually, quote-unquote, gutter oil.
Unbelievable.
Which is literally oil they have ladled out of the gutters to resell.
They don't care. That's the bottom line, is they don't care.
To break it down a little bit more granular as far as the Magnolia State.
Yeah.
As of 2023, because that's the latest data I've got from the Office of the United States Trade Representative, Mississippi was the 30th largest state exporter of goods. Canada made up 15% of our exports.
Okay.
If you look at them in the order, it's Canada first, Mexico second, Panama third, the Netherlands fourth, and China is fifth.
Interesting. So it has an impact. Now, the president said this could be short-term pain. He made that clear. Yeah, this is going to hurt in the short term. We're better off in the long term. And I completely appreciate him being honest about it, as politicians should be. And I would say he's a brutally honest person. He doesn't hold anything back, and he doesn't mince words, which is refreshing for a politician. You don't get a lot of political doublespeak out of him.
I found it, the actual numbers. So the largest market, Canada, Mississippi exported $2.2 billion in goods in 2023 to Canada, which was the 15%. Mexico, we exported $2 billion. Panama, $1.6 billion. The Netherlands, $782 million. And China, right behind them, $781 million.
Wow. Good stuff. Thanks for that. So I completely respect the strategy, and he's brilliant in its use. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But he's telling you it's going to be short-term pain. My concern is honestly that we're at a very difficult situation in Mississippi with respect to our farmers, and you heard Mike McCormick talking about that. Is this survivable? The short term, some of these farms, I wouldn't be shocked to see many in the state of Mississippi file for bankruptcy this year as just a result of the inability to access credit. The banks aren't willing to loan them money because many of them have struggled and have not been profitable of late, and there's concerns on the part of the banks that they will not be able to repay those loans to service that debt, and it's a big risk. So hopefully we get a resolution on this and our farmers can thrive as they need to. It's critical to our state's economy. We're stepping aside for a break. Sandy Middleton, Executive Director of the Center for Violence Prevention, is at 11:05 today.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
back, everyone. It's middays. Senate committee has voted on, I believe, RFK Jr. I think did I get that right? There's been a vote that I think advances out of committee, so it's like the first hurdle in the confirmation process.
He was approved by the Finance Committee.
Okay, the Finance Committee. But is there another one that has to vote on him? Another committee before it goes to the floor?
No, it just goes to a full Senate vote now.
Okay, because the caption on the bottom of the screen I'm looking in the studio says Senate Committee to vote on RFK Jr. And I thought they already did, and that's why I'm a little bit confused. So I'm not sure what they're talking about.
Yeah, the vote was 14-13.
Wow.
With Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana being the decisive vote.
Okay, because he was a bit on the fence for a while. Senator Tom Tillis, I believe, is also not sure at this point. So this will be an interesting appointment to pay attention to. For sure. That was quite the hearing, RFK Jr. Back here at home, lots of stuff going on. Bills. Big day today, isn't it, for bills to pass out of committee?
Deadline day.
So
after today, a large portion of the bills that were dropped between the beginning of the session and the first deadline day will enter the status of dead. But they're not dead.
Senate Bill 2547. I'm pleased to see this one, Rhino. I don't know that. Let me see what the status of it is. This is filed by. Okay, so has it passed committee yet? No action on it at a committee level that I can see. Referred to is the latest status. Referred to the Senate Accountability and Transparency. This filed by Senator Angela Hill. This is something that we've talked about rather continuously on this program since I started hosting. And that is to prohibit public sector entities from contracting with businesses on the basis of their sex, their race, their ethnicity, other such characteristics. No preferential treatment could be provided to so-called minority businesses. It's been in place for years. Now, all agencies, all municipalities, all school districts, all the various public sector institutions that procure goods and services in the state of Mississippi, which are bound by state procurement laws, they don't all have policies that provide preferential treatment to minority businesses. But there is one particular entity that does, and that's the city of Jackson, the capital city of the great state of Mississippi. And I've shared in the past that I believe until a measure such as the one filed here by Senator Hill is enacted, that the city of Jackson has little to no chance of improving. Now, the city certainly could rescind those policies. It is possible we would get a new mayor and a new city council, or perhaps just a change in attitude, and they would rescind the current policies utilized in procurement by the city, which do, in fact, grant preferential treatment to so-called minority business enterprises. And this bill says you can't do that. You can't give preferential treatment on the basis of race, ethnicity, or sex. Specifically, it's Bill SB 2547, those of you tracking at home. But I applaud Senator Hill. She told me she was going to do this, and I appreciate that. Hopefully it will survive the test of committee today. That's the Senate Accountability and Transparency Committee. Hopefully it will get on out of there, get to the Senate floor, passed, sent over to the House, passed the House, to the governor's desk for signature. I would say this, Rhino. If this doesn't pass, then everybody in the legislature that's applauding President Trump for ending such policies at the federal level is a hypocrite. Am I being too strong there?
Nah.
It's true. What we're doing at the federal level should be as well implemented, emulated at the state level, because it's just common sense. It's time to restore merit and qualifications and skills and value as the methodology in awarding contracts. We're taking a break. Sandy Middleton is coming up after the news.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're in the Element Wealth studio. Thanks so much for joining us. We're pleased to welcome now Sandy Middleton, Executive Director of the Center for Violence Prevention. And also, we have a trafficking survivor with us in the studio today, Grace. And we appreciate you ladies for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Sandy, tell us first what you're working on with the legislature that you need to get done that would help the center fight the scourge of human trafficking.
Well, of course, at the top of our list is always the appropriations request. The legislature has been really good to us to support our human trafficking fund, and that allows for so much of the work that's being done in the field all over the state. So we really need that money again to continue this work, and also the crime victim amount that's going over to the Department of Health that we suffered because of the VOCA cuts, all the federal issues that we had 2 or 3 years ago that affected all the states. And so that injection of cash was, it would have cost, for our shelter, for our program, it would have cost us about $500,000 in funding. So it was a big blow, and the state legislature really saved us, and it saved our program. So we really need that funding to continue. So, and then, we've got multiple rate bills that we're working on. We infused the cash to the crime lab back a couple of years ago to update everything. They had their equipment and their employees and staff and everything, but we're still struggling to get our hands around what's happening through the process. We continue to have victims show up at hospitals and be turned away. Nobody's there that can do the kit, or they don't have a kit, and just that attitude of we don't do that here. And then we still can't get our hands around where all the kits are. Do we have a backlog? How many are here? How many are there? And so Representative McClain has got House Bill 1298, and that actually is going to require everybody that could have their hands on a rape kit to report how many they have, where they are, to the Attorney General's office, because we just haven't been able to, to figure that out. And that's huge when you think about justice for rape victims. And then we also have House Bill 928 that's going to put some requirements on hospitals. And there's several other good bills that are out there, but that's kind of our focus this year, aside from the appropriations.
What about just punishment for these criminals?
Yeah, and that's the frustration, is that, if we've got DNA evidence that we can take these offenders to trial, now that we have what we need at the crime lab to be able to process the kits and recognize and identify the offender, it just seems like a no-brainer that we need to connect those gaps and make it happen. We know that these rapists are repeat offenders. We've seen it happen locally lately. And it just seems like that should be an easy fix.
Gotcha. Grace, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
You look great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here, too. So you are a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
have some very challenging circumstances.
Definitely.
How did the local police get involved in your situation? How did they help you?
That is a good question. How the local police got involved in my situation, it was a sting that they did an operation, and they were actually looking for a different individual, and they came across me. And so when they came in and did the sting, we were at a hotel room, and when they came in, I was petrified. I was like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And so after that, he just started talking to me. It was a sergeant. He sat me down and he was like, can I talk to you? And first they allowed me to get dressed. And so once I did that, he sat me down and he just started talking to me, and he just started telling me about, the woman at the well. Mm-hmm. And I was like, he said, do you know about the Bible? And I was like, yes, I know about the Bible. And he just started talking to me. And then he showed me a picture of his daughter. And he said, this is my daughter. And, of course, I'm playing hard. I don't care, But then, it made me think in my own mind, what would my daddy think where I was at? And I was missing at that moment. And so, it made me just really touch base with my human part, and instead of the hard shell that I was trying to be, it made me really just go inside and think, what about my daddy too? And so, and what about me? What did I deserve to be there? And so just sitting me down and treating me like a human being instead of a criminal is what really helped me.
Interesting.
Definitely.
So there's no secret. You guys know this better than most, that we could be just out and about in our normal daily routine, mm-hmm. and encounter victims and not know that mm-hmm. they are being trafficked. Is there anything that we can do to recognize them, Grace?
To recognize a victim, it is kind of a difficult situation, but at the same time, you can have open eyes and ears you can hear things or see things. Some of the things that you may see, victims of human trafficking, they don't really have a say-so in their own lives. A lot of them hold their head down a lot and don't make a lot of eye contact as well. But as a victim, I will know I'm a survivor. So as a survivor, I will know a victim, automatically. It's like a bond that you just instantly know, oh, this is a victim of trafficking right here. But a lot of signs would be like just not having their own identity. If you don't resonate with who you are in yourself, if you are always, about this other person, life is definitely there to make this other person, better. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, Sandy, you and I have been discussing this issue for a while, and it's one of those things that it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We in my Rotary yesterday had an FBI agent here in Jackson.
Really?
Do a great presentation.
Yeah.
And explained a lot of the aspects of this problem. My question is, in the few years that you and I have been talking about this, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? About the same? What's your assessment?
I don't think the crime of human trafficking is any different. I mean, it's there. An interesting thing that we're seeing is that the reports or the tips are less. They're fewer now than they were a year or two ago, but we're finding that the tips are more legitimate.
Okay.
I mean, maybe a couple of years ago we were getting tips about, well, I see this white van in Walmart. We were fighting all these urban legends and everything, or urban myths. And now it seems like the tips are coming more from professional places. And so I think the training and the awareness and, everything y'all do here at SuperTalk and a lot of other places have really helped inform the public. And so I think they know a little bit more about what they're looking for. And so I think that's helped. And I think also, just like Grace was talking about, the importance of local law enforcement, we really want to continue to encourage local law enforcement to do this work. State and federal, the feds are great. They can work a case up one side and down the mm-hmm. other, but there's only so many of them. Yeah. And the same for the state agencies. And, we really need our local guys to continue to step up, and we need our DAs. We haven't had the only successful state prosecution we had was a couple of years ago, and our DAs really need to step up and go through the training and learn how to prosecute these crimes, because then we could really see a difference. There's a lot of cases that are open out there. They're just not going to trial.
What's the holdup?
I think that, of course, all DAs are worried about their win percentages. I mean, there's a lot of politics in this issue. I mean, everybody wants to talk about it, but when it comes down to the work, it's really hard work. Takes a lot of time to investigate these cases. It takes a ton of time to get ready to prosecute them. Then you got to educate the jury. It's just such a heavy lift that a lot of times what we're seeing is they're just pleading it down to another offense. And it's good. I mean, it's good that they're getting something, but at the same time, the public wants justice. Yeah. And I think we've seen this in the last election. I mean, the public across the board is hungry to see justice out there, and this is just one of those issues that that local law enforcement and local DAs, they need to step up and provide justice.
Definitely.
Glad to know that. So we need to put some pressure there.
For sure. And we've also added, we've got our Operational Human Trafficking Task Force Board that has trained over 500 investigators around the state. They're training and certifying the investigators. And we've also added a couple of prosecutors in that group. So they are going to be actively aiding DAs to be able to prepare for court and know how to prosecute these cases.
Gotcha. Grace, before we go here, we got about 15 seconds. What can we do to help human trafficking victims recover?
What we can do, we can love on them. We can support them in any way that we can. Be there for them, be their community, and definitely continue to seek justice.
Was that critical to your recovery?
It is very critical. The village, it takes a village, and definitely that village, it has to come from the heart. And so when people are surrounded by love, they bloom, and it becomes
Makes
a beautiful
sense.
thing.
Sandy, Grace, thanks for coming on.
Thanks
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
We're coming right back, folks. Stay with us.
Mississippi. And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, onto the real part.
Dynamite!
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. We appreciate Sandy and Grace. She looked great, didn't she? Right? And I mean that from the perspective, not that she didn't look great last time, but she seems like she's doing even better today. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
And it was just so much more comfortable, and so, gosh, that just makes you feel good when you see a victim of the most heinous of human crimes, arguably, and recovering and thriving. She told me she's in law school. She's going after these people. She will, too, won't she? I guarantee you.
And there's one thing to remember. We were talking about things to look out for, and a lot of the more subtle signals can be difficult to pick up on. You got to be aware. You got to have your head on a swivel. But there is one universal signal for help that if you see someone doing it, you need to contact the authorities, give them all the information you can on where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. And if you're watching on SuperTalk TV, I'll show it to you, but I'll describe it as I'm doing it. If you take a hand and fold your thumb into the palm of your hand, and then fold the other four fingers over your thumb, and you repeat that. So like your thumb is being captured by your other fingers. If you see someone making that, a lot of times if they're being led away somewhere, they'll put it behind their back and do that. But if you see someone doing that, that is your go signal to alert the authorities that someone needs help. They're being forced to do something against their will.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. So that's just sort of a universal signal, right? It's
universal help sign.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know that. I wasn't aware. Man. That, well, it's, I think the thing that's just stuck with me that I'll never be able to just comprehend, and you recall when we, and you may have known it before, I can't remember if it was the Attorney General, who it was that we were talking to, had an interview going on, and the subject was human trafficking, and what we learned is that most of those involved in these crimes are family members of the victim. That the trafficking is being perpetrated by a member of the victim's family for drugs, for money, other purposes, some sort of exchange with another party, who knows what. I had a hard time understanding that, comprehending it. I still do. And it's so sad. Man, oh man. Let's see, the question on the C Spire text line that was from Mike from Madison. So Trump has floated the idea of getting Canada to join the U.S. as a new state, even though an unlikely occurrence. What would that look like? Would it be the whole country as a state, or would it be broken into multiple states? What is the process for incorporating a new state? Why would we want to do that? So, I don't know that he's ever gone into that level of granularity, Rhino, where he said, hey, we only want certain provinces and not others. It's always been kind of referenced as make Canada, and I always thought that meant the whole country, into our 51st state. Now, the process for becoming a state, I know you and I have researched that quite a bit when the Democrats are in the control of the levers of the Congress. Always talk about D.C., Puerto Rico, as an example. Help me out here. I believe that this can be done by the Congress and signed into law by the president. I don't think it's
kind of a back and forth deal. Like, I know it's probably not the best source for information on this, but from my memories of the movie The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, you have to have a territory. The territory develops its own government. It holds a vote whether or not the people of the territory want to be a state. And if the people vote to be a state, then they send people to Congress to petition Congress over whether or not they will be allowed to be a state. Then Congress passes an act that allows the territory to write their own constitution, and it goes back and forth until finally the Congress approves it with a joint resolution, and then the president signs the joint resolution and all that.
But the main point I want to make is this does not require ratification of the Constitution.
No.
It doesn't require
the members of the state would have to ratify their own Constitution.
Correct.
The new state.
But the existing states, in order to amend our Constitution, 3/4 of the states, right, have to agree to that. I can't remember. I may get them reversed. 2/3 of each house and 3/4 of the states seems to be. It's a very high bar. That's my understanding. Is that
correct?
Right? Yeah. Okay. So that's an extremely high bar that you can imagine is. I can't comprehend what sort of amendment proposed would get that kind of support. If you think about how sharply divided our country is, both state versus state, and then the Congress itself. I mean, heck, look at the House, which is probably the most accurate representation of the division in the country. The balance of power right now is 220 to 215. Republicans versus Democrats. Of course, right now it's 218 to 215 because we got two hanging seats out there. And that's a problem that we might ought to mention is that Governor Kathy Hochul up there in New York, she is delaying. She's putting some roadblocks in place to conduct the election, special election, to fill the seat vacated by Congresswoman Elise Stefanik in New York. Represents a red district in the state. Kathy Hochul, a deep blue liberal Democrat, doesn't want New York to replace Elise Stefanik. That's my take on it, with another Republican who would join the U.S. House. So right now, the balance of power, and there's another seat that is still open as well, but it's 218 to 215. We had 3 members that got called up by the Trump administration to serve. Marco Rubio, Mike Walz in Florida. Of course, Rubio's over there on the Senate side. But we had another House member. I can't remember who it was, but Elise Stefanik, of course. So, from New York. But she's putting up roadblocks to prevent, at least at a minimum, delay, even though the New York Constitution, just like is the case in every state, prescribes the process for holding a special election when a seat is vacated in the House. And she doesn't appear to be abiding by that. Bottom line is, it's ridiculously razor-thin close in the House, and that makes passing legislation extremely difficult. And the one that bugs me the most, that I sure do wish we could get some focus on, something we've talked about continuously, and that's the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, also known as the Trump tax cuts. They expire at the end of the year. We now have 11 months, less than 11 months remaining to take action to pass a measure that would either extend the cuts beyond the termination date of 12/31/25, or my preference, make them permanent. One of the problems in the House that I'm worried about is we got a few members that represent deep blue states, have districts in deep blue states, Republicans that really want to see the state and local tax deduction cap increased, if not fully removed. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act limits, for federal income tax purposes, the deduction of state and local taxes to $10,000. And these deep blue states, because of their high income property and property taxes, they pay a whole lot more, many residents do, than $10,000. They don't get to deduct the excess. So these reps want to either increase that cap or remove it altogether. The problem is when you start injecting that into the negotiations, you prolong it, and you also risk not being able to get a bill that would pass muster in the Senate for reconciliation purposes, meaning you need 60 votes in the Senate, and that ain't going to happen, which means nothing happens, and that's bad. We're coming right back.
Mississippi Days with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk Mississippi.
Love is but a song we sing, feels the way we die. You can make the mountains ring, or make the angels cry.
Ah, yes, that would be the Summer of Love, 1967. The Youngbloods get together. Appreciate that, Rhino. Yeah, I couldn't remember the other one on the C Spire text line. Matt Gaetz. That happened so long ago. It seems like I forgot. I knew there was 3. Matt Gaetz, Mike Waltz from Florida, and then Senator Rubio from Florida on the Senate side. Elise Stefanik in the great state, the Empire State of New York. 3 on the House side. There are 435 members of the House. 220 Republicans were elected. in November to 215 for Democrats, but Republicans lost 3 to the Trump administration, except Matt Gaetz. He was initially considered, but that didn't last long for Attorney General. Nonetheless, 3 seats are vacated. I believe one of those, right, Rhino, has been, that's my latest take, one of the Florida seats seems like has already had a special election and good to go. I believe that's right. I thought they went to the polls last Tuesday. Check me out on that. But even when we get everybody seated, let's just talk about that, because that's the way we're going to be permanently when we get into some big-time legislating. 220, 215. So you can do the math. You can lose 2. That would result in a 218, 217 Republicans in front of.
They had the special primary election for Congressional District 6.
Okay, primary.
The special election takes place on April Fool's Day.
All right. So we still got a ways to get somebody seated. My apologies on that. Nonetheless, when it's all said and done, hopefully Kathy Hochul will do her job as the governor of the Empire State and allow the special election to occur to replace UN ambassador tapped by the president, Elise Stefanik. Man, she's excellent, too. She's one of my favorite members up there. She, again, earned my respect when she took on the loony presidents of those universities that came to the Hill to talk about the anti-Semitism activities on their respective campuses. But, man, she took to task Claudine Gay. Remember that? The president of Harvard, of which Representative Stefanik is a graduate. I'll never forget that. So good. Nonetheless, you can only lose 2. 2. So when you think about passing sweeping tax legislation, and you got these folks in the blue states, Nicole Maliotakis also represents the great state of New York. She's on record as saying, we got to raise the SALT cap. And by the way, just doubling it from $10,000 to $20,000 ain't enough, she says. And the problem is, again, you're complicating the math. Why is that important? Because once the bill passes the House and it goes to the Senate, the parliamentarian, the all-powerful Senate parliamentarian, analyzes the bill with the assistance of the always wrong Congressional Budget Office. Congressman Michael Guest spoke at a Rankin County breakfast this past Saturday, and he pointed out what you and I talk about all the time. They're always wrong, all this data. But I will have to give them a pass in this regard. The rules only allow them to deal with the raw numbers. They can't say, oh, wow, if we cut this tax by this percent, that's going to stimulate economic growth, which is going to increase revenues, which we all know is exactly what happened, despite the Democrats running around telling Americans day in and day out, the deficits are caused by the Trump tax cuts. Horse hockey. You can't do math. You suck at it. You're about as good as what's our old friend over there at NBC that attempted to do the math. Is it Brian Williams? Oh, my gosh. But you see the complications of getting this legislation passed? Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. Let's get this done. Hyper-focus on renewing, or better yet, making permanent the Trump tax cuts. Send that message. You don't have to worry about this, businesses. You know where you stand from a tax perspective for several years, if not permanently, until the Democrats, God forbid, get the levers of power such that they just rip the whole thing apart. Because that's what they would do. They don't pay their fair share. I mean, that's their damn solution to everything.
It is weird that those people are also upset that USAID is being dismantled brick by brick. And they're really upset with the people doing the dismantling instead of being upset at the people that have been stealing tax dollars.
Man, oh man.
Democrats only worry about money when it's money they were planning on pocketing some of.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's totally crazy.
Every other time it's just, Uncle Sam's Uncle Moneybags to us. We just spend.
This was something that was, of course, created by President Kennedy, this sub sort of agency, whatever the heck they call it. And let's be honest, it started out as noble, virtuous. All these things do. They run around
public facing.
Right. That's what I was going to say. They run around promoting that message and trying to make everybody feel so good. And honestly, they're only doing it to make themselves feel good. You know that. But inevitably,
well, that and their friends abroad richer.
Right. And you get worried about.
Wait, you need $100 million for somebody in Senegal? Yeah. Well, who's it going to? I can't tell you. Well, what's it for? I can't tell you. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And I dare say that this thing wouldn't even get any attention were it not for the fact that they went off the rails, and rather than using that dab of funding for its intended purpose, where it may do some good around the world, they had to stick their identity politics, radical climate, gender, race ideology in the middle of it. They're obsessed with that crap, man. We said it before on the program. It's the pillars of the Democrat Party is climate and race. That's what they're all about. Everything revolves around that. Got to have that in it, included in everything. Unbelievable. We got
to have $20 million to make an Iranian Sesame Street.
God, dog, it's so frustrating, no doubt. So Trump, banned to this issue. He bans transgender women from U.S. prisons for female inmates. And they're all just irate about this. I'm just having a hard time comprehending. I'm going to give you a statistic here that just shocked me, if I can get to it. Let's see here. Give me a second. The sheer numbers just shock me. I always think of it as being a small number, and I think in general it is a small number, but it looks like there's kind of an outsized, extraordinary number in prisons. So there are 15% of the women in prisons are actually
dudes in dresses.
Correct. 15%. Now, how does that compare to the general population?
I would say outsized would be an understatement.
On the other side, it's hard to keep up with all the transgender stuff.
Well, the vast majority are dudes in dresses.
That's correct. And that's the point I'm about to make. There are 750 transgender men out of 144,000 male prisoners. These would be, we got to come up with a label for that's the opposite.
Well, they have a label, but I might get fired if I use it.
I was just thinking about that.
Another word for a steer and another word for a dam.
Oh, man. 750 out of 144,000. But not with respect to the actual female prisons. Are you shocked that 15% of them are
dudes in dresses?
That's incredible. And then they wonder, why do we have rapes? Why do we have pregnant prisoners? You can't make it up. We're stepping aside for a break. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
in Mississippi.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We're live in the Element Well studio. Let's see. That was close, Rhino. I thought you were about to say chicks with, oh, well, you know, Dan in Hattiesburg. Man, oh, man. So this bill should die today. I'm not really sure I understand why it was proposed and who benefits from Blake and the Delta. I'm trying to find it. HB, you see
1462,
that? Yeah. What's that about?
It, I believe, would allow for a landowner to, well, no, that's the wrong one. Hang on. Hunting, fishing.
I mean, it's real simple. It says hunting and fishing on lands of others by unlawful entry. Remove requirement of payment of restitution to landowner for white-tailed deer taken thereon. Something must have happened to cause a lawmaker to draft this legislation. I'm not sure exactly what. It's this is Representative Kincaid. He heads wildlife and fisheries in the House. Also, Representative Hale, I'm looking at it, is signed on to the bill as an author. I don't know. That's a good question. I'll see what we can find out about that. Mike from Madison went on to say, by the way, with respect to this possibility of Canada, he said, as a state, we already have a large country. I watched a video of someone who superimposed the U.S. over Europe. If you look at the map of the U.S. over Europe, Florida would be in Syria while California would be in Great Britain. I don't think it's about the land, Mike, as much as it is the president believes there is lots of synergy that could be achieved by adding Canada as our 51st state. They've got enormous oil reserves that we could tap. Believe more than we do, if I'm not mistaken. They would receive our military protection. They already get it, to be honest with you, without paying. He's pointed that out. And there would be, we wouldn't have all these tariffs and all these trade disputes and so forth. So the nation of Canada is not very populous. I don't recall what the exact population is. It got about 4 decently sized cities. I think Toronto, if I'm not
40 million.
40 million. Okay, so that's the population of California, roughly, one state. And I bet Toronto's, 5, 6? It's a big place. Montreal, Vancouver.
Toronto's 3.
Okay, that's a little less than I thought.
Montreal's 1.8.
All right. Vancouver?
Quebec's 500,000. Vancouver is 700,000.
That's about it, isn't it? But the land area of Canada, is that as larger than the U.S.? Because you get up in the boonies there, it's like not inhabitable for a whole lot of people. Of course,
Canada is slightly larger than the U.S.
Well, that's what I thought.
3.85 million square miles compared to 3.79 million square miles.
Okay. So what about I think I got my geography right. Toronto, just across the lake there from New York, Buffalo, correct? In Ontario, is that right? I get my Canadian geography accurate? I've been seeing Ontario's actually running ads, like economic promotion ads on American television.
Toronto is directly across the Lake Ontario from Niagara Falls and Niagara on the Lake and all that. Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Buffalo, which is a large...
Buffalo sits on the end of Lake Erie. It doesn't quite... I mean, some of the suburbs touch Lake Ontario.
Gotcha. Jeff in Grenada says, we have bigger fish to fry, no pun intended there, huh, Jeff, than a dang deer. I kind of agree with you, Jeff, honestly, but you know what happens is some incident, more than likely, Rhino, occurred.
Yeah, this bill would remove the requirements for a hunter to pay restitution to a landowner if they illegally kill whitetail deer on their property. Previously, if someone hunted animals on land without permission, they had to pay the landowner restitution for each animal taken.
Okay.
This bill makes an exception for white-tailed deer, meaning no restitution would be owed. However, it gives landowners a new option to seek civil claims for any property damages caused by illegal trespassing involved while white-tailed deer hunting.
Interesting. Well, it's time for a break on Middays. Fox News, SuperTalk News is up next. We're coming right back with another hour of talk from the Element Wealth Studio.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth Studio. Are you thinking about or planning for a retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and the old guarantees. The C Spire text line, of course, 601-879-4395. Middays with Gerard will be at the Trade Mart in Jackson on Thursday for the Dixie National Sale of Champions. The Sale of Champions at the Dixie National Radio is brought to you by Mississippi Farm Bureau, growing the future of agriculture and helping students go to college through the annual event. This annual event. It's also brought to you by Gray Daniels Ford and Brandon, Mississippi's only 5-time #1 volume Ford dealer. So I was just informed by J.T. Mitchell, SuperTalk Mississippi News Director, that this article I've been working on for a couple of weeks concerning House Bill 1, that is the rather sweeping measure that would change the income tax structure as well as some other provisions in the state of Mississippi. That is going to be published at SuperTalk's website, SuperTalk News website, supertalk.fm. He tells me by the time we're off the air today, Rhino, so I hope you guys will check that out. And I hope it's helpful, informative to you. It not only incorporates some analysis of the legislation, just kind of reviews the key provisions and also addresses some of the key concerns people have about the legislation. But we've also embedded some sample, something we've talked about on the air. We've embedded some sample taxpayer cases that shows the impact on their overall tax burden based on these provisions, starting with 2024, and it distributes all the way out to 2037, showing the income tax burden per year, the comparison to 2024, and the comparison to the prior year. So I hope you'll take a look at that and that it helps. I suspect that some of the legislators as well will be reviewing that piece I hope they do, because I think putting the model together in particular shows exactly what it means, rather than just kind of guessing, oh, my gosh, you're doing this, that, and the other, and this is going to affect me this way. Take a look at the actual numbers. Now, everybody's situation's different. We certainly appreciate and understand that, but I think once you see the model, you get a pretty good idea of how it would affect what I believe are a lot of typical cases in our state from a taxpayer perspective. And once you look at it, and when we get back on the air, after you've reviewed it tomorrow, again, shoot me your personal situation if you want, or any scenario, and we'll plug it in and see what it looks like. If it's your personal data, we commit that we obviously won't disclose that. That will remain private. We're not going to do that. But if you've got just any scenarios you'd like to see modeled, what does that look like? Single, married, retire, working, spend this much on food, this much on non-food, this much on gas, this is my income, etc. We can take a look at how that sorts out in this model we've created. So, looking forward to that. The White House, of course, is accused. We were talking about the USAID again. Maybe started out as something of value, but gone off the rails. And you look no further, right, Rhino, at the DNC officer leadership elections last week.
Oh, man.
That's nuts. That's crazy. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. Again, eaten up with this gender crap.
Crazy people clapping for crazier people espousing even crazier concepts.
I don't get it. It's like they completely were tone deaf on November 5th. They just don't get it. But here we are. They continue to lean into it. Now, what they say, they're leaning into mainly gender and race ideology. It's all about the color of your skin, you like to say, the melanin content of their skin, that is prioritized over everything. Yet these are the people who claim to be fighting racism. And they engage in racism in everything they do. Didn't they stop the deal after they had the elections? Wait, we don't have one of these. They literally validated my description of how Joe Biden chose his cabinet. One of them, one of those, one of these. Isn't that what they did at the end?
Yep.
We need more non-binary, purple-haired nuts. I don't know. Just come up with some description.
Which, ironically, the non-binary candidate for DNC vice chairmanship didn't receive any votes.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. It just seems like that they aren't paying attention to what people are saying. And what people are saying, in my view, they certainly said it at the ballot boxes, yeah, we're tired of that. We're tired of everything being driven by the way one looks or their sexual orientation, their sexual identity, which is a farce unto itself. They're tired of that, and they don't want the entire society being based on that.
Well, you remember what Napoleon said.
What's that?
Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Well, if they want to keep going down this rabbit hole and isolating themselves into a silo of weird, go right ahead.
I cannot.
It feels like America has turned a corner.
I agree. And I was about to say, I can't imagine a more stark example of just that. Just get out of the way and let them focus their meeting on, wait, we don't have enough non-binary people on our board or in our leadership or whatever the heck it is. And watching all the pearl clutching and teeth gnashing over the prohibition against
dudes in dresses
being in prison with women. It's like their world came to an end. How did we make it before that? Man, keep doing it. Napoleon's right. I'm following his lead, his advice on that. So the House yesterday voted overwhelmingly to legalize mobile sports betting, but you know what they say in the Senate, don't you, Rhino? Not so fast. I don't think this is going anywhere. Again, in the Senate. You recall last week we had Representative Rob Robertson on the program discussing some school choice legislation. He has a bill. Representative Jansen Owen has one as well over there in the House. And we were kind of surprised to see that Senator Dennis DeBar, the Education Committee chairman in the Senate, had a bill that, for the most part, mirrors the legislation introduced by Representative Jansen Owen. And it's real simple and straightforward. It just says a student enrolled in a public school would be allowed to change schools and enroll in another one without requiring approval by the transferor, is the legal term for it, the school involved in the transfer, the home school for the student. Nope, you can't block me. Now, the transferee, the new school, the receiving school, there's some guidelines around that. Capacity, of course, is a big one. If you don't have any room, okay, we understand, then you don't have to accept this applicant. But you got to be reasonable about that, and I don't exactly know what the math prescribed in the legislation is. I haven't seen that. But there are widely accepted best practices, are there not, in terms of computing capacity for school.
We're not blazing new trails on this.
Yeah, but nonetheless, that's reasonable. You can't just overwhelm a school. Here's where I'm going, though. It was reported yesterday that Senator Dennis DeBar says we don't have the votes. So what that tells me is that legislation coming from the House to the Senate, he says we don't have the votes for his bill. So legislation coming from the House that would expand and create this what's called open enrollment, public to public, looks like it's DOA in the Senate. Again, well, heck, if that's DOA, then Representative Rob Robertson's bill, which would extend that even further to allow a student stuck in a failing or D school or district, it's a D or F, district presently, but if it's been a D or F school in the past 5 years, that would qualify as well for use of the state funding for said student to pay tuition to a private school, find a better setting. That's got no chance in the Senate if we can't get basic public to public passed, so here we go again. Another year it looks like we're going to get bullets on school choice. The other states are busy passing sweeping legislation. Other neighboring states. Coming right back.
Hey, this is Bob.
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
We are back with you in the Element Well studio. Timmy McGee says elections have consequences. Senators and I travel all over. Elections have consequences, senators, period. I travel all over, have been in every one of your districts, and 80% of your voters are not happy. I hear you, Tim, and of course, you know what our remedy is to that is to vote for somebody else. Is to replace those. Somehow they continue to get elected, don't they? It's not just the Mississippi State Senate, by the way. That's a problem in our politics. And I understand those who would say we need term limits. And I've always been on the fence on that, and I've explained that because they go into scorched earth, burn down the house mode when they know they're terming out. We've witnessed it. I can't help but recall that stupid omnibus bill passed a couple of years ago. Had to think about the year. It was midterm year. It was when, which was 22, the end of 22, before Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who was the soon-to-be Speaker of the House, he pleaded with the Senate, don't pass this omnibus spending bill to fund the government. Wait till the House is seated and let us work through regular order. But they insisted, and they passed it, and only because the Democrats were joined by some 17 Republican senators, including, you remember this, Rhino, 4 or 5 of them who had announced their retirement. And then you look at the list, I talk about Republicans that joined with Democrats, including our own Senator Wicker, to vote for that legislation. But what I recall was looking at the pork spending, the pork barrel spending in that bill. Tens of billions of dollars going to many of these retiring Republican senators' states. Senator Shelby, as I recall, from Alabama, he was top of the list. You remember looking at that, Rhino? Like of the top 5, 4 were Republicans. And they were just essentially thumbing their nose. I don't care. I'm out of here. I'm just going to bring home the bacon to my state, baby. Might get a building named after me or something like that. Oh, man. They were just flouting the rules, essentially, or really not the rules, common sense, because they knew they weren't up for re-election, and things change. On the other hand, there could be some value in the term limits when you know that so many, you get to a point where almost every word and action are measured on the basis of the next election cycle. I don't want to do this. I don't want to say that, even though it's the right thing to do and would serve the people, because I got to get elected. They can't take my picture off the wall, as the saying goes. So we were talking about this school choice legislation, and I know that there are concerns about the lieutenant governor and his influence on this. It's no secret the lieutenant governor is not a fan whatsoever of school choice. He said that on the program. But it's worth pointing out there are people, Republicans in the House, that aren't fans of school choice.
Then if Lieutenant Governor Hoseman doesn't want it all to fall at his feet, he should put some pressure on whoever's in the committee to pass it out of committee so that they can hold a vote on the floor.
Could agree with that.
So that the citizens of the great state of Mississippi can vote out the people they don't want in there anymore, that don't represent them anymore.
I completely agree. I just want to point out Senator Dennis DeBar, who chairs the Education Committee in the Mississippi State Senate. He ain't no school choice person either. In fact, he's made it clear publicly, I don't like it. Right? I'm not. And remember, in the House for years, it was Representative Richard Bennett was the Education Committee chairman under Philip Gunn. And again, those bills always died. 2 Republicans from the coast region. So it's, while I get it, the lieutenant governor equivalent.
If they don't like catching the flack for this, then they should put it up for a vote and let the other senators catch the flack instead.
I agree with you.
Until then, DeBar and Hoseman are the enemies of school choice.
No doubt about it.
It's really that simple.
And I have the same concerns about this bill that I just talked about, introduced by Senator Angela Hill, that would bar preferential treatment based on some minority status, as it is called. But more importantly, it doesn't actually say that, I don't think, in the legislation. I have to look at it. But rather, it just calls attention to, it does say minority set-aside contracts. Those aren't that prevalent in state government. In fact, I've never seen it in all my years of doing contract work, bid work with the public sector in Mississippi. It's more these municipalities that have adopted these policies that do grant preferential treatment based on race and gender and other characteristics as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if the lieutenant governor sort of gets the word out he doesn't like this as well. And it could be pure politics. It's no secret. He and Senator Hill, I don't think they have the greatest working relationship. And that's a shame, because this is good legislation, and I still will maintain, until somebody can provide me a better argument, that the root cause of all the problems in the city of Jackson. And if anybody thinks they're not problems, you ain't been to the city in a while. It is replete with crime.
It's led by a charlatan.
No doubt about it. Ridiculous third world degraded infrastructure. The water problems are nationally infamous, are they not? All the above. Poverty, abandoned properties, drugs, businesses shuttering and moving to nearby counties. I mean, you should go down the list. Until we get legislation like Senator Hill has proposed enacted, prohibiting this preferential treatment in awarding contracts for various services in the city of Jackson, never going to fix the problem. And if you look at the underlying root cause of the trash problem and the water problem and the water meter, all of that is rooted in that. Every bit of it. So I hope this thing passes. Folks out there listening in our legislature, I'm a fan of this legislation. Please get this done. I hope the lieutenant governor sees that this would go a long way towards combating the corruption. Because you know what happens. This breeds corruption.
I fear if it's not an idea that he believes he came up with on his own, it's not going to be considered a good idea in his mind.
You know, I hate that might be the case. I want to rise above that. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't.
That's the feeling I've gotten from years and years of his obstruction of a seemingly simple, common sense, conservative approach to governance of the state of Mississippi.
Yes, and in this case, one that I believe would produce value for the entire state. It is our capital city. It's why we had to create the CCID, right? The crime problem got so bad. And you know when you have crime, you know what people do? They move. People that can't, the very people you need to stay, they're the ones who pick up and say, I'm out of here. The crime's running me out. The ones who remain, because they can't afford to, you just make it worse for them. And that's the ones who you claim to be the champions for. It's perverted at best. Oh, man. And then we got the mobile sports betting deal. And again, my concern is that that's going to go down to the Senate. Senator David Blunt chairs the Gaming Commission, a Democrat from the Jackson area. He put the kibosh on this thing last year, and I don't know that it'll do any better this year, honestly. Representative Casey Uri, he told us last year, I'm bringing this thing up again. It did pass the House. What was it? A pretty overwhelming margin, I think, Rhino, but it looked like it stopped short of the total membership voting. I was a little surprised by that. 88 to 10? That's 98. Where's everybody else? Present? No vote?
You can't expect legislators to work every day.
Didn't this occur at 4 o'clock? Didn't they gavel in at 4 o'clock yesterday or on Mondays? I think that's typical. 88 to 10, that's 98. Don't we have 122 last time I checked? Where's the other 24? Something seems kind of fishy there. Of course, Democrat leader Representative Robert Johnson from Natchez, he voted against it. And I was in the gallery last year when Representative Uri presented this, and man, all the hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth from the Democrats who just paraded up to the well there to offer their opposition. I don't know. It really bothered me. We'll see what happens in the Senate. But then we got this big tax bill waiting for something out of the Senate to compare with the House's bill. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the SeabrookPaint.com Weather Center, I'm Bob Sullender. For all your paint and cutting needs, go to SeabrookPaint.com. Today, mostly cloudy, high near 77. Tonight, some fog early, then mostly cloudy, low around 64. A 20% chance of showers for your Wednesday, high near 80 degrees. And a look to Thursday, mostly sunny conditions, high all the way to 82. This this weather brought to you by our friends at Gaddis McLaurin Mercantile in downtown Bolton. Shop local. Gaddis McLaurin Mercantile, your building supply expert since 1871.
Hopkins Construction and Roofing, we're not just about repairs and replacements. With our Rooficide services, we help keep your roof looking new and free of those unsightly stains and algae for years to come. Safe, effective, and EPA approved. Rooficide is the simple solution for long-lasting roof protection. No harsh chemicals, no damage, just a clean, beautiful roof. Call Watkins Construction and Roofing today, 601-966-8233 or nomoreroofstains.com.
Why don't you mind your own business?
Mind my own business? What's that supposed to mean?
No, I was just thinking about all of the news of tax changes, insurance changes, regulations that are being passed down to business owners. I don't have the time to keep growing and to keep up with changing payroll regulations.
I know. It seems like all I do is handle employee-related problems.
You know, I hear People Lease can help.
How can they help?
People Lease can handle our payroll, taxes, employee benefits, and workers' compensation. They even offer an affordable and customizable 401k program and a 24/7 online human resources support center for all my HR needs.
Think of all the time we'll save letting People Lease handle our payroll and benefits administration. I'll be busy growing my business and letting People Lease take care of the rest.
Sounds like a good business plan with People Lease.
Let People Lease mind your business so you can mind your own business. Call now, 601-987-3025. That's 601-987-3025. Or visit freepayrollquotes.com for your free quote.
Hey, I'm here with Alex Murray of Auto Innovation.
At Auto Innovation, we want to change your car buying experience. When you're in the market for a quality pre-owned vehicle, please come see us. We want to make friends, not just customers. All eligible vehicles are inspected by a MasterTech mechanic and come with a limited powertrain warranty on us. We are located on Highway 51 in Ridgeland. Come by and see us or check out our inventory online at autoinnovation.net. Let us change your car buying experience.
Auto Innovation, Highway 51 in Ridgeland.
I'm Caleb Sailors. You're listening to SuperTalk Mississippi News. If you see smoke coming from the Vicksburg National Military Park on Wednesday and Thursday, officials are saying do not be alarmed. The National Park Service will conduct prescribed fires in order to manage vegetation at the historic site near the Mississippi River. The locations for the fires will include large grassy areas in the South Loop near the Illinois Memorial and Shirley House, the western slope of Fort Hill along Graveyard Road and Thayer's Approach. It will encompass a total of 231 acres. The University of Mississippi Medical Center has officially expanded its operations with a new footprint in Madison County. Officials with the state's largest hospital system announced on Monday that the new Colony Park South location in Ridgeland has begun welcoming patients. In addition, a total of 20 specialty clinics will be opening within the facility over the course of the next month. You can find out more by logging on to supertalk.fm.
This is professional ball player and former Mississippi State Bulldog, Jake Mangum. On the field, I've got to be ready for anything. And off the field, I've still got to be ready for anything. That's why I'm excited about Farm Bureau's new auto and life insurance discount. Two things I needed a great price from my friends at Farm Bureau Insurance. Visit favrates.com for great rates on home and auto insurance. Or find a local agent at msfbins.com. Farm Bureau Insurance. Go with the home team.
Make plans to visit Grammy Museum, Mississippi to experience Music America, iconic objects from America's music history, now through April 2025, featuring iconic objects from artists such as B.B. King, Billie Holiday, Bob Dylan, Buddy Holly, Ella Fitzgerald, Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, Jimi Hendrix, Leadbelly, Sam Cooke, and Whitney Houston, with specific artifacts on display. To purchase tickets or learn more about the exhibit and other events, visit GrammyMuseumMS.org. America's Music Highway is supported by Visit Mississippi and the Mississippi Humanities Council.
You know that nowadays, most people go online to look at a business before they spend their money. Are customers able to find you online? With the power of STMM Digital, you can reach potential customers and get more referral and repeat business. STMM Digital's highly trained and trusted staff is ready to work with you to help your business capitalize on the power of digital marketing. Call 601-991-2305 or go to stmmdigital.com to get started today. Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
draws the crowd and plays so loud, baby, it's the guitar man. Who's gonna steal the show? You know, baby, it's the guitar man. He can make you love, he can make you cry. He will bring you down and he'll get you high. Something keeps him going.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. That's the great David Gates and Bread, Guitar Man. Good tune there. So we've been talking about some of this high-profile legislation. Of course, you know, Rhino, there's about half a dozen, maybe it's more like 4 or 5 subjects related to the various bills that have been introduced, filed, officially registered down there at the Capitol. Other than the rest of them amount to more than 3,000 total, is my understanding this year. What the heck did all those things do? I really don't know. And it's every year. This isn't anything new, but I guess I need to expand my horizons a bit. I'm sort of hyper-focused on taxes, on school choice, on ballot initiative, on this bill that Senator Hill has introduced that would prohibit preferential treatment in public sector contracting. I think that's a critical one. School choice, of course, we said. I can't get too far beyond that. I've recommended, with respect to Medicaid expansion, you know, that was a big one last year that consumed lots of cycles. And I'll say again, my recommendation is don't even touch that thing right now, maybe ever, from strictly a financial perspective, because we need some clarity from the Trump administration on what's going to happen to the Medicaid program. My fear is that the Division of Medicaid in the state of Mississippi is going to inform the legislature they need a whole bunch more money just to operate the existing program. That the result of the COVID era, because the very first bill that passed in March of 2020 when President Trump was in office, what was it called? The Families First Coronavirus Act, as I recall. That was a $900 billion measure that preceded the CARES Act, which was, $2.1 trillion, I think, was the price tag on that one. Trillion. Into the name of COVID relief. Is that right? Families First Coronavirus Act? I got that right? Yeah. All right. That's the one that had the Medicaid provision in it. It basically said to the states, hey, this COVID thing is going to make a lot of people sick. Therefore, your Medicaid spending is likely to rise. But on the other side of the coin, we're concerned that people that are currently enrolled in Medicaid may no longer be eligible or lose their eligibility and thus qualifications for benefits while the public health emergency due to COVID is still in place. Okay, states, here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to give you 6.2 percentage points more than we being the federal government, provide at the state level to fund the Medicaid program. You, on the other hand, in exchange for that additional federal money, you're not going to kick anybody off the rolls. Well, it should come as no surprise that once the public health emergency ended, and it was extended like a bunch of times, remember, over that 2 or 3 year time period? March of 23 is when finally the Biden administration said, okay, I think we're done with this COVID thing.
Yeah, the original Families First Coronavirus Response Act had provisions ending December 31st of 2020.
Yeah, I am laughing because that was a joke. And it ended up staying in place in accordance with the law.
Far too long.
Right, till May or March of 2023. And the federal government then informed the states, okay, we're letting you know. We're going to start phasing out this additional money we've been sending you during the public health emergency for your Medicaid program. We're going to start that September 23, and we're going to whittle that down, decrement that until the enhanced match is out of here December 31, 2023. By the way, states, you need to get planning for this and begin the process of disenrolling those who aren't eligible, because you're not getting any extra money to keep them on your rolls. Well, you may not be surprised to find out that the latter is a lot more complicated and challenging issue than the former. The federal government said, 3, 2, 1, you're out of money. And the state said, we're still trying to find all these people. I'm exaggerating a bit, but you know the process of disenrollment is easier said than done. Fast forward to 2025, we're still sort of disenrolling, yet we're not getting any additional money from the federal government. Thus, we have an imbalance of money coming in and money going out. And I think the Division of Medicaid is going to say, we're working on this disenrollment. And they may actually come back and say, well, it turns out that these people actually do qualify. I don't know. I'm just saying that I would fully expect Medicaid, which comprises the second largest spending object in the general fund budget, second only to education. I should have said constitutes, not comprises. That requires multiple. I got ahead of myself there. I was thinking about education and Medicaid. But it's real simple. Medicaid is about 15% of general fund spending, whereas education is more than half, 53, 54%, last I checked on it, in the state of Mississippi. Don't be surprised if Medicaid shows up and says, we got to have more money. And my concern is that's going to throw a wrench in the old works with respect to tax reform. But more importantly, the Trump administration is signaling reforms to the way the federal government funds the Medicaid program. That means the states should be prepared for less money coming from the federal government to operate Medicaid. I'm not even talking about expansion. I'm just talking about the base Medicaid program. And that could result in less money coming to Mississippi from the federal government for existing Medicaid. It is totally responsible and prudent to have full clarity on that before you think about adding more expense by expanding Medicaid. So you legislators out there that might be tuned in and listening, I hope you will heed that bit of suggestion and consider that. We need clarity. Why is Medicaid on the chopping block at the federal level? It's a $620 billion program in a $7 trillion budget. But when you look at the big spending programs and categories of spending, when you got Social Security and Medicare that the president has said, we're not touching. You got debt interest we really can't touch. We can't default on paying our bills there. The president has said we're going to spend more money on defense. You pretty much relegated to Medicaid and all the other agency complex. And I'm all for cutting a bunch out of that crazy swath of agencies. And Elon Musk and the president, to the extent they can with executive orders, they're doing that now, like with the USAID program, as an example. No doubt. And then getting rid of some of these buildings we're maintaining and paying rent on that are not being occupied. So there's been significant savings that have been achieved already with Elon Musk doing a complete investigation of all this unnecessary spending. But Medicaid is a big one. And there's already, again, some degree of buzz around Washington of changing the way the federal government funds the Medicaid program, and it could cost the states. We got to be cognizant of that before we take on more. Ben from Madison says, Governor Reeves should flex his constitutional muscle and call the legislature in for a special session if they can't get public-to-public transfers done this regular session. Make the legislature say no at the very least. It's not a bad idea, Ben. You know, I called for a special session to address the PERS program last year as well, because it's not quite as urgent, but it's something that's going to have to be addressed, and the legislature knows it. They already increased the employer contribution rate, and it's effectively, that is an increase in taxpayer spending, and they sent $100 million to the program, stroked a check last year because we happened to be in good shape and produced a surplus, and a big chunk of that surplus went straight to the public employees' retirement system. But that's another matter. To Ben's point, I think, Ben, that the governor is so hyper-focused, and I'm with him, on eliminating the income tax and tax reform. I don't think he wants to kind of muck up the works with really getting out there on school choice. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studios.
Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Back with you in the Element Wealth studio, our final segment today. Man, where's the time gone? On the C Spire text line, Willie and Duffy says, I think Rhino is right. For it to be a good idea, the lieutenant governor has to be the one to think about it first. And I know we talked about a lot of measures. Which one were we talking about? I think Angela Hill's bill, right? The one that would bar the granting of preferential treatment based on race, ethnicity, and sex in public sector contracting. Again, I want to point out that all that is sort of a state-level policy that mirrors exactly what the president has been doing in Washington since about an hour after he gave his inauguration speech, right, Rhino? I mean, right off the bat, that was among his first executive orders in the military, in the swath of agencies, to terminate all the DEI programs and practices. And I think a whole bunch of people are on the street that were involved in those programs, government employees. Unless they reassign them, I actually think some of them are treated.
There have been reports of some being reassigned and trying to hide out within the bloated bureaucracy of the federal government, but most of the super sleuths on social media are digging into those and trying to find them whenever they can.
He said in his inauguration speech, I remember, he said that our brave warriors should not be subjected to political theories and social experiments, which is a kind of a nice way of saying all these woke DEI programs, the freaking privilege walks in the Air Force is the one I remember so vividly, which was totally insane. And then it leaked all these PowerPoint presentations to our West Point cadets, telling them how racist the country was. Remember that?
Yeah, the performative pity parties.
No doubt about it. So, yeah, I hear you. And I think we have to be clear, though, it's politicians seek attribution. Let's be honest. It's not just a lieutenant governor. He may be a little excess in that regard. I get it. But it's pretty common among politicians, is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Who was it that famously said, was it Reagan, that we could get a lot more done if we didn't worry about who got credit for it? And that's kind of what I feel like is going on here in Mississippi to some extent, and we're kind of a microcosm of that. Darren in Jackson says, Gerard, don't you know that racist and misogynist elected Trump? Granted, there were 71 million of them. Actually, 77, I think, is the final tally, but I get your point, of course. And they're still saying that, are they not? Every move that's made every day, they try to attach racism.
It's because the party of quote-unquote empathy are not very good at empathizing with those they disagree with, and their entire ideological foundation really only works if they have the majority or if they can convince you they are in the majority. Now that they have been exposed as a shrieking minority, they're not as effective. And they're losing more and more steam.
It's ridiculous.
And I hope they will continue to lose more and more steam because I'm sick and tired of the tail wagging the dog in this country.
We want phone betting, Jason Mendenhall says. I believe Delbert is holding up progress until he makes a run for governor and then wants to say, look what I've done. Yeah, Jason, honestly, I don't think he supports it, is my belief. I don't think that he's going to change his position on that if he were to be the governor. Hoseman as governor is the same thing on the C-Spire text line. If you don't want me to say it out loud, but the only thing that makes any sense is that Hoseman is bought and paid for, money talks. Yeah, I'll tell you this, though. I've known the lieutenant governor probably longer than anybody that's out there listening, going back to 1985. He doesn't need money. I'll just tell you that. So it's not that. What I would say about him, and I've known him and worked with him a bunch, is that he is he's very much a fan of his own ideas. I think that's true, and he likes to kind of micromanage from that perspective. That may be an unfair characteristic, but he can be, as people that get in that position often are, a bit obstinate to outside ideas. You said it a minute ago.
He hasn't done much to counter that public opinion of him.
He believes what he believes very strongly, and he sticks by it. You have to give him that. It's just sometimes it can be a bit maddening because things he believes I don't happen to think are in the best interest of the state. Not everything, but the school choice is an issue. The mobile sports betting, I've never actually had a conversation with him about that. I don't know where he stands. I know Senator David Blunt opposes it. And as you saw by the 88-10 vote in the House, there are people in the House that don't want to be on record as voting for that thing either, right? Is what it looks like.
It's one way to look at it.
Okay. Well, you may have some other thoughts about that, but
I think it's more likely they just didn't show up to work on a Monday than to have some wild political stance on something like that.
Andy says we need a special session for universal school choice. I don't think that's going to happen, Andy. Not only that, we wouldn't get it passed. That's not going to matter. Just because the governor wants it, I don't think having a special session is going to force it. It maybe would put it more into focus. But we're out of here today. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.